Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, Los Angeles, cities that are major urban sprawls, the odometer once a week or once every 2 weeks. Hello and welcome back to Car Renting University. I am your host, Alex Withrow. Today we're going to talk about how many miles will an Uber driver put on your car should you rent your car to an Uber driver. Before I get into that, click below, grab the 5 things you must do before starting a car rental business. That also includes the Car Share Growth Guide, which gives you a city-by-city breakdown of which car share platform is strongest in your area. There's lots of good information in there. Check it out. Give this channel a subscribe and a like. I always appreciate that. I get this question a lot. If I get my car to an Uber driver on Hyrecar or on a private rental agreement, are they gonna just like totally blow out the mileage on the car? How's this gonna shake down? So first, you really have to ask yourself, do you have an electric vehicle or do you have a gas-powered car? Because the mileage calculations on an EV are a little more different. They can handle way more mileage than a gas car can. For today's conversation, I will pretty much keep this to a gas-powered vehicle to kind of give you an idea of what that mileage is gonna look like, because most of the cars we have at this point are gas-powered. In terms of how many miles a driver is going to put on your car, I will say this initially, it depends. It really depends on which city you live in. I'll give you an example. Many of you know I've run car businesses in 3 different cities now, New York City, Atlanta, and Miami. Really what's interesting is that based on the layout and geography of a city really shapes, how many miles a driver is going to drive. So for example, when I was in New York City is a very condensed area. Drivers are really just running up and down Manhattan or from the airport and back. So they're not like really getting out there in terms of major mileage. My drivers typically in New York City would put, maybe 25, 30,000 miles a year tops on a car, which is really not that crazy. It can get a lot worse, trust me. So in New York City, it really wasn't that bad. So renting to Uber drivers in that market made a lot of sense because it wasn't killing the mileage numbers. But then when I got to Atlanta, the calculus on that really changed and it was very different. In Atlanta, I started having drivers putting on 8 to 10,000 miles a month. And I was like, whoa, we can't do that. Also, you have to keep in mind, if someone's driving that much, the chances of them getting into an accident are very, very high. I mean, it's only a matter of weeks before that happens because they're just on the road so much. But, Atlanta has a much more spread out geography. It has a perimeter around the city. It has you can drive all the way out to the burbs. So there's a lot of like sprawling suburbia even outside of Atlanta. So that said, in that city, putting on 8 to 10,000 miles a month was not that hard to do for an Uber driver. That's just very common there. In Miami, it probably splits the difference between New York and Atlanta just because it's a little more of a condensed city and most people are just running from midtown to the beach and back, etc. A general rule I will tell you in that how many miles, most drivers are putting on average, I would say probably around 4,000 to 5,000 miles, probably about a month. I would say 4,000 to 5,000 miles a month, I think is a pretty safe guess. Some drivers will do 8 to 10. So this is a thing. You have to really understand, you have to run the calculations of how long you want this car to last, what you want your equity to be in the car by the time it's done. You don't want to get underwater. So you got to run all these numbers, especially if you have a loan. You can't have them expend more mileage on the car that's going to put the car underwater. So you have to run those numbers and make sure that you're at a comfortable place. I will say, if you hold the drivers to around 4,000 to 5,000 miles per month, which is about 1,000 or a little over 1,000 a week, you should be okay. You probably won't get underwater in that scenario, especially if you have a loan, and especially if you put a little cash down on that car initially. I always like to say that 4,000 to 5,000 miles a month is a good place to hold a driver in terms of mileage. If they're going 8,000 to 10,000 miles a month, I would say too much, way too much. You may say to yourself, well, how do I control this? How do I track this? In terms of controlling and tracking it, I would just say you can have the driver send you a picture of the odometer once a week or once every 2 weeks just to check in and see where the mileage mileage is. But really the easiest thing to do, every Uber driver knows how much mileage they're putting on a car, because typically if they're working, with driving with Uber at Getaround, or if they're working with Hyrecar, they're typically having to pay overage fees on miles at some point. So they all have a very good understanding of how many miles they are driving each and every week. So if you say to a driver, hey, I need you to hold the mileage at around 4,000 to 5,000 miles a month, right away they're going to tell you, oh, that's going to work for me, or that's not going to work for me. They'll know right away. This isn't super hard. They always typically know how many miles they're putting on a car. So that said, what I would do is keep it in that 4 to 5K range a month. I typically think you won't get underwater at that level. You have to be careful. So when you're in a city like New York, or a little more condensed city, it's easier to hold drivers to that mileage cap. But if you're in a place like Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, Los Angeles, cities that are major urban sprawls, it's much, much harder to do that. So really, you just have to communicate with the driver, make sure that you're getting that odometer reading maybe every 2 weeks, and make sure everything's on target. And that's really kind of the most important thing with regards to managing Uber drivers and their mileage. But it is an important part of this, is managing that depreciation. And you really have to have a strong understanding so that you don't get underwater on a loan, or that you just don't blow out the equity on the car. Unless you're trying to get rid of the car, then go for it. It's also an effective way to get rid of a car is if you're trying to dump a car and you don't want to sell it, and you can give it to a high mileage driver and they'll probably total the car within 2 months. So that is a strategy. Drop some comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, how you guys deal with this. It is definitely a tricky situation and a delicate balance for sure. Before I go, click below, grab the 5 things you must do before starting a car rental business. Check out the Car Share Growth Guide. Give this channel a subscribe, and I will check you in the next episode. Thank you.